This is Bam Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air with Kellene Vaile. We're going to talk about surviving versus thriving, and we'll actually get into the total focus there, the critical shift that changes everything in personal preparedness. But we also got your Facebook group, Preparedness Pro, so people can check that out. They'll be able to click to that. But I want to thank you and welcome you to the Bam Electric Ghost podcast. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. It's been a good day, and this is a great way to wind it up.
It's cool. So you're the best-selling author of multiple books, including The Magnificent Pantry, Neanderthals in the Kitchen, and you've been like revolutionizing how people think about preparedness. So what made you get into that area?
Well, I was raised by a very independent mother. She raised 5 kids, a lot of times on her own, and she always planned for a rainy day. And so I was raised with that. But then I lived in the Philippines for a year and a half, and I saw their inability in many cases to plan for a rainy day, just living hand to mouth, literally. And that was a stark wake-up call, and I got more concentrated in my efforts to focus on preparedness. But when I first started out, I was focusing on the gloom and doom, the things to be afraid of so you get prepared. And I realized that wasn't a lifestyle that I wanted. I don't believe in living based on fear. And I changed my whole attitude, and I came up with the 10 principles of preparedness and started teaching that. And that's been 15 years ago now.
Yeah, it's interesting because some people like the hyperbole of like, the end of the days level event, and they're looking for that to happen. And it's like, well, that's not quite happening. Like it's when more likely is like, the storms.
Yeah.
We like I live in New Hampshire, so we're in the middle of a windstorm right now. So hopefully we cross my fingers, we won't get knocked off the air. But we have backup generators and stuff, so we should be okay. But the whole that's the kind of event where people like you live in a blizzard area, you probably want a backup generator.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, people lose jobs, people have health crises. It's a crisis if I forgot to let my dog in, I panic.
All kinds of levels. It's like,
yeah, it's all kinds of levels. And I believe that it's a magnificent lifestyle. If you can live self-reliant, you will have much more joy and much more peace in your life. And you'll have things settled and decisions made before you have to make them in a panic.
Yeah, we were talking to some people about like, the legal side of that before, about like people's like wills and probate, and people don't think about things because they don't want to think about it. But
right, and that's preparedness.
Yeah, it's like well, being, I'm 57, but age 27, I had a level 3 sarcoma. So I survived it. I'm a cancer survivor, but it made me think about things in a different way. It's kind of like pre-cancer, I was like one way, post-cancer, I'm another way. And it allowed me to like look at things with a different lens. And so like you've got a different lens here where you're thinking about like, being able to take care of yourself.
Yeah, I think that the things that we can't control, we don't have any business worrying about them. Let God take care of that. Last I checked, he's still a God of miracles, and he's did the loaves and fishes. He can still do that. Let's take care of the things that I can take care of. Can I make sure that I have some semblance of knowledge for first aid care, emergency first aid? Do I know CPR? Can I be useful that way to my fellow men? What about food on your shelves? I was just reading a comment today about an ice storm that was announced over and over again on the news. And it hit, and only a few hours in, you got people panicking and going, how am I going to eat? What's going to happen? Their power turned off. And it's crazy what will turn people into a tailspin when, with just a little bit of forethought, instead of thinking DoorDash all the time, a little bit of forethought could have given them peace and calm. They could have made a camping event out of it, camping indoors. They would have been fine and dandy if they just taken time to go, okay, how can I make sure that I'm going to be at peace in the midst of a curveball that life will definitely throw at us?
Yeah, it's important because here, in New England, we never know what the weather's going to be. It's one way or the other. And a lot of times, like my daughter is really big into like self-reliance. So she has like an indoor hydroponic garden, grows her own, you know, like lettuce and greens and spices and all kinds of stuff. And then we got
Wonderful.
solar panels, and then we have canned goods and generators. Like, yeah, we're already thinking at that level because she was already kind of getting into it. She's just 25, 20 something. It's like always researching things, but so she got me aware of certain things, and so yeah. But it's like you can't just. I think it is so convenient, like you had mentioned, and like people doing the DoorDash and Uber Eats or whatever, and then so they don't even have like the basic. They have no eggs, no butter, no flour, no sugar. They can't make anything on your own.
Or
Everything
if
is
they did have them, they wouldn't know what to do with them.
yeah. They don't know. They lost the art of cooking. I was
Yeah.
lucky. My daughter, my mom. She had three boys. I was the one that paid attention to how to cook. Yeah, she was trying to teach my other brothers like how to cook, and they didn't care, but I did, and so I actually learned.
And I bet you're a fine catch because of it.
But yeah, it's just something like some people say, "Well, I don't need to know that." It's like, well, you never know what you need to know.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. Anytime somebody says, I don't need to know, or I already know, that is a lost opportunity for them to grow and to prosper, in my opinion.
And being self-reliant, because a lot of people I hear a lot of Americans like the statistics, like people are living paycheck to paycheck, or they're working in a company. They're not entrepreneurs. They don't have their own things, so they're dependent kind of on going to that job. Like in the pandemic, there's certain jobs where you couldn't go to them
Hmm.
because they closed the mall or they closed the restaurant. They closed. So then suddenly, well, what are you going to do? So nobody ever thought, well, they were going to close. The job was going to close down. So now there's like at least it's out there now. It's like, oh, that can happen.
I'm a big proponent of self-employment. I think self-employment is the smartest thing. You're because when you have a traditional job, you are relying on somebody else to make decisions about your future. And you don't know how they're going to handle the money. Are they going to run their business into the ground and you're left without a job? Are they going to make bad contracts, bad agreements? I mean, anything can happen. But when you're self-employed, yes, it can be stressful sometimes, but at least you're betting on you. And who else to bet on you than you, right?
Yeah. Well, I've been in software design for years, and I went into consulting where I kind of go out and work on projects. And sometimes I go work with a startup, but it's because I got a skill set. Like I do software design, I've been doing it for 20 years. So in this field, there's always work. And I work with banks, I work with insurance companies. They always have something they're doing. And so it's been, but I used to work directly for the insurance companies and banks, and I said, nah, I don't want to do that anymore because I got sick of the bureaucracy. So I decided to go and work on the other side. But yeah, it just became. Then now I can do this podcast. So and in this ways, I can do my music. I'm a musician. I'm a producer. There's three. I have like three hats. There's other things I want to do. And so if you open up and diversify, I don't think anybody's that's just one type has one type of thing they like to do. A lot of people have a
No.
lot of things they like to do.
Yeah, diversification is an important component of being self-reliant as well. Is you don't have all your eggs in one basket. You don't count on this one lantern to always work. You don't count on this one heat source to always work. You have backups to your backups, and that goes for income streams as well. I think everyone should have a side gig, and I think everyone should be fulfilled in what they do.
Yeah, a lot of people, they're kind of like in a toxic situation, but it's like what they know. Like they might have a job they really don't like, but they know they get that paycheck, right? But they're not really fulfilled. It's not what they really want to do. So they feel safe, but are you really safe? Like
Yeah.
you feel safe because you're not challenging yourself.
Yeah.
right? So you're kind of like it's on cruise control. You're like phoning it in versus they, sometimes you have to be a little bit uncomfortable to get comfortable.
Oh, absolutely. To get comfortable, you're right. To get truly comfortable, to thrive, you've got to get uncomfortable. You've got to push yourself past those boundaries.
Yeah, so I think that's the hard part because people, well, I want, I got my degree. Now I'm going to be on cruise control. Like in my industry, we have to learn all the time. Like
Oh
tech,
yeah.
everybody knows, it reinvents itself exponentially.
Yeah.
Whatever I knew 2 years ago is not going to work. Like we have to continually learn whatever the next thing is. And some people don't like that. They don't like, they want to know, like, well, I got 20 years of this and I can be cool with this. It's like, yeah, but things change and you should be willing to understand, like, we're in a big environment of change in the economy. It's like the horse and buggy with this AI thing.
Yeah. AI
There-
is going to impact everybody's job. Everybody needs to better understand AI because it will have an impact on their job. I don't care what they do. I don't care if you're a server in a restaurant or if you're a tech geek like yourself. AI will impact
it's
everybody's
already,
job.
it already
Yeah.
does. I mean, like in our industry, like it's eliminated programmers. Programmers, a lot of programmers have already been eliminated. Business analysts, architects, because it can actually automate a lot of things. Things that people would have thought white collar jobs wouldn't get, you know, taken away, or tech jobs, but there are things that can be automated and workflows and all kinds of, there's like robotics and automation and bots and automated workflows that repetitive tasks and even sophisticated repetitive tasks are getting eliminated.
Yeah.
And so, I actually went and got certification so I would understand how to get into machine learning so I could actually apply it to the business partners I'm working with. So it's like something you have to kind of take on. And there's some people who are like, oh, I hate it. But like, well, of course, probably the people working on the horse and buggies, people taking care of the horses, they probably hated the cars.
Yeah.
But
I
eventually,
remember I
you had
remember
to
when
shift.
computers became a thing and I was stuck in my ways and I was like, I don't need a computer. And one day my brother said, "Hey, you need an email." And I'm like, "What do I need an email for?" And now, I mean, can you imagine somebody not having an email address today? I mean, who knew that we were going to be so drastically impacted? But I'm telling people AI is going to drastically impact your job no matter what you do.
Yeah, it's like the net. There are people saying, what do I need the net for?
Yeah.
And now everybody knows that, boy, the people, like my whole job is remote. I have to have high
Mine
speed
too.
internet to do it. And so
Yeah.
like I don't even have to, I used to be a road warrior. I would be on planes from like Sunday to Thursday. But the market shift is like I don't have to actually go there. I mean, I lived in Japan for 2 years, and I love to travel, and I love to do that. But in some cases, like, well, there's certain things, like priorities in my life. I want to do other things. Like I'm more entrepreneurial, so I don't want to be on a plane all the time. So
Yeah.
I decided, like, and some people might want to be on the plane all the time, but like nowadays, I don't know if you do. But back in the '90s and the 2000s, like, yeah, I didn't mind doing that. But like, things shift. It's like you don't necessarily have to do that, to be able to talk to somebody in Australia or the Netherlands or Iceland or anywhere. You can work all kinds of global teams without even having to go there. Where in the old days in the '90s, I would have had to go there.
Yeah.
But now I don't.
Yeah, there's so much that people can learn if they're willing to open up their minds, not just to what's new, but to what's old. I can't believe all the people I run into that don't know that you can make your own butter out of whipping cream. They're like, "What? You can make your own butter? How do you do that?" It's so very easy, and I think that there's a movement of people starting to embrace older things, like for example, sourdough. Sourdough bread has become such a big deal, and everybody making their own sourdough. Well, I mean, that's a wonderful trait to know.
Well, bread making's cool. I love homemade bread.
Yeah.
Homemade bread, like without a bread maker, like doing it like
Yeah,
the old
doing it
way,
yourself, it's
like my
so
mom.
therapeutic, and it tastes so yummy. I mean, I don't know how anybody could eat store-bought bread when they
Hey,
know how
once
to
you
make
make your
it.
own bread, you don't want to buy store bread.
No. No, I think we need to embrace some of the old ways better too. I mean, whatever happened to growing some of our own food? People are so disconnected from their food source, and yet we have this just-in-time system. People are so disconnected that
Yeah.
they won't even drive to Taco Bell. They'll have DoorDash deliver Taco Bell to them. That's how disconnected they are.
Well,
Um,
being a cancer survivor, I got really kind of hands-on on where my veggies are coming from, just
mhm.
because the amount of pesticides being, I want to be a big going to another topic, but like being a cancer survivor, you start looking into things.
Yeah,
And
you
then you
have
start
to.
seeing like the level of carcinogens going into the system. And it's like if you can control the growth of your own plants, you control how much of that stuff gets on it. So I'm not doing any pesticides. So being a cancer survivor, like you don't want carcinogens. You've dealt with what happens when you get too many. So it's like you make a decision, but some people they just don't realize they don't know what's out there. They didn't do the work, and growing your own food that's a big thing. But you got to be conscious of what you're doing because like, you could grow your own food and then you still put pesticide on it. you know.
Yeah, one of the things that I teach in my book, Neanderthals in the Kitchen, is I teach people about the Mittleiter method of gardening, which will get you a significantly bigger yield. We're talking 15 to 20% minimum, bigger yield in smaller space and without pesticides and without chemicals. And it uses 70% less water than traditional gardening methods. I think if somebody were to grow a cabbage this big because of something that they did on their own naturally, I think they'd be thrilled. It's like, holy cow, I grew this big, huge cabbage or these
It's
beautiful
just so cool
tomatoes.
when you grow your own food to see it
It
actually
is.
happen. I remember
Yeah.
even being young, my mom, she grew corn and pumpkins and strawberries and eggplant, like everything. And
And
just
yet
being a kid
I drive in
having
the country and I don't see any gardens. People have this house on 5 acres, but there's not a single garden. I don't get that.
yeah, I don't know. My mom, like, he was born in Morgantown, West Virginia, and they held the whole victory gardens during World War II,
Yep.
and they just people would just, her generation, they like my uncle's the same way. He had gardens. It's like my whole mom's side of the family. They had gardens. My dad's side of the family, they were more urban. They didn't have it. They didn't know about that. But my mom, she knew about it.
Yeah, the victory gardens were a big deal. In fact, they truly were aptly named as victory gardens. There was one year in particular that the US victory gardens produced enough produce to replace all of the produce that was being bought from other food producers so that that food could then go to the soldiers. I mean,
Yeah,
we're
yeah, that was
talking
awesome.
millions and millions and millions, tens of millions of tons of food were produced just by people having these small victory gardens.
And then also you gotta learn how to like can or
Oh,
be
yeah.
able to put things away. And like mom, learned how to make jam and canning. And I was in this. I'm a child of the '70s. And I'm watching her doing that stuff. So it's like I think your mom, like your parents kind of give you the prep or give you the experience that your mind's open to something. And then if you don't have parents that did that, then you got to talk to somebody like yourself.
Yeah, well, I cover that in Neanderthals in the Kitchen. I mean, that it's kind of a tongue-in-cheek title, but basically it's how to set up your culinary world in such a way that you can be self-reliant and also pay less for your food, significantly less, have it be healthier for you as well. So that's what Neanderthals in the Kitchen does. And then what I did is I created the cookbook, which has about 260 recipes, and it's recipes made from shelf stable food. So everything is something that you can do yourself or have on your shelf for, years and years and make amazing meals. Because a lot of people, when you talk about food storage, they get this yucky thought in their mind, like just beans and rice. And if I'm going
Yeah.
to make beans and rice, they're going to be kicking beans and rice. They're going to be awesome.
Yeah. You want something somebody's going to want. You don't want one of those like, you know, not to put it down, but it's like some of these meal kits are like, okay, well, maybe it's like a ration kit, but it's
Yeah.
not something you really want to eat. It's like, it's total like, okay, there's nothing else. So I guess I got to have it.
Yeah. I don't want anything in my pantry that I would say I would eat if I had to. I want things that I would eat because I want to. like Coco Van, or some of the awesome casseroles that I've got there. I just served one up for my nieces and nephews the other day, and they said, this is the best casserole ever. They just loved it. They gobbled it down. But there's just so much that you can do and have it be even gourmet style. I love to cook for my friends. I love it. That's kind of how I let them know that I love them. And so if I'm going to cook something, I want it to be presentable. I want it to be something that they're still talking about weeks from now. And those are the kind of recipes that I put in the Magnificent Pantry, are recipes that I would want to serve with friends.
Well, I like your approach, because you see, like, on, you watch TV or see the net, you see these people selling these like ration kits, and they're saying they're delicious,
Yeah.
and looking at it, it's like, it doesn't look delicious.
No, it doesn't look delicious. And if it doesn't look delicious, you're not going to get people eating it.
Yeah.
Yeah, they think a worst case scenario. Well, I guess if I have to eat it, I will. But you know what? That's the worst time in the world. I mean, we stress eat now. Can you imagine how much stress we'd be under if we were surviving Hurricane Helene or Helen or Helene? It's Helene. Yeah, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I get it mixed up. Or Hurricane Milton. The time to experiment with food and to have something that's so is not when you're stressed out. It's not when life's thrown you a curveball. Let's prepare to nurture ourselves when we're doing food preparedness. Let's prepare to be emotional. Let's make sure we have plenty of chocolate stocked up, or being able to make chocolate stuff. I mean, come on.
Yeah, be able to make cookies, or
Yeah.
bread, and just be able to do something like this is something I want to have, not like you said, like it's like an emergency. Spam is okay. Can be a gourmet thing, but like you just don't want nothing but spam.
No, although I have a couple good spam recipes that I like.
Well, spam's cool. I mean, I was in Asia, and like in Korea and in Japan, like
Yeah.
they use it like in all kinds of ways. So
Yeah. I love a good spam stir fry.
yeah, there's all kinds of stuff they can get into, but yeah, it's just being able to take the planning. Like anything is planning. Like anybody that does well with a business, that you got to have a plan. You got to have that vision. If you put time into anything, I'm a musician, right? 10,000 hours of practice. That's how you get to be a musician. Like you do the work, and athletes are the same way. You do the work. Well, if you want to learn something, if you want to, stay dedicated to something, you got to put time in. So you're teaching people methods on how to be, sustainable and have it be, worthwhile. And that's something that you're not going to want to get into.
Yeah, the self-sufficiency covers every aspect of our lives. The 10 principles of preparedness are in order of prioritization. A lot of people decide that they want to get prepared for whatever gloom and doom event that they have. And so the first thing that they think about is food. But in order of prioritization, out of 10 principles, food is number 8. That means that in a crisis, in a curveball, you're going to have 7 other more important areas that are going to hit you straight on. Like when I got in a car wreck several years ago, the first thing I did was not call for Domino's Pizza. Food was the last thing on my mind. There were other more important issues that hit me first.
Yeah, because you got to take care of your health. You got to take care of your, you got to have shelter. You got to have a place to go. Like, so what's your emergency plan? Like when there's a hurricane or something, do you have the money to get out? Right?
Yeah.
Like if you're living in an area where there's water and you got to get away from the water, or you got to get away from the wind, but then you got to have a plan to be able to get there, right? And not get stuck in the traffic jam, right?
Well, and spiritual and mental fortitude is first and second principle, because there were friends of mine who were caught in Hurricane Milton, and they were hardcore preppers, but guess what? They lost everything. So all of their tangible things they didn't have anymore. So guess what they had to rely on? They had to rely on their spiritual and their mental preparedness and that fortitude. That was much more important to them. And that's all they had. So that's why those are the first and second principle. The third principle is physical. Like you said, you got to take care of your health, but you also know how to take care of your physical security, being able to defend yourself. And then next is medical. I mean, so you can see how those are going to be bigger priorities than food.
Yeah, definitely. Because a lot of people like you lose a job, you don't have like, did you build up your medications? Did you have like if you're a diabetic, right, and you have to have insulin, but you don't think about having like a vacation supply or an emergency supply of insulin
Yeah.
or any of your meds, and then something happens, and then you're waiting for like, well, UPS can't get to you because they can't get to your house because the house is not there. It's like
Well,
you got
or
to have
you
your
have
meds.
situations where manufacturers stop making your drug suddenly,
Yeah,
and there's a pause, there's a halt in production for
shortages.
some
Yeah.
reason. There's so many things that can interrupt our life. We're living on the cusp of a disaster every day of our lives. So at some point you got to start figuring out how you're going to take control.
Yeah, I always made sure, right, so far I've got like a 3-month supply of my insulin, you know,
Wonderful.
and some of my other meds because I learned because one time I had a situation where like there was like a shortage and the company was like, you just couldn't get it. And then the postal service was like losing my shipment.
Oh,
Like,
wow.
was it- like so it's like if you're a diabetic, like we can't really afford for them to lose your insulin.
No,
And then
no.
you got to
Yeah,
go out
I'm
and
on
buy
a
it again.
medication that I rely on heavily, and I tried to go off of it, and that was not a good thing. So I definitely make sure I have plenty of that in stock.
Yeah, and some people forget about like have making sure that you have your core your core things that you need, Like you
Yeah,
also said the thing that you mentioned is like being able to do some level of medical, like being able to like you know, do simple first aid. Like maybe you
yeah.
should take a
Can you
class.
can you stitch a wound? I
Yeah, stitch
mean,
a wound, like
that's important. Can you stop
clean a
bleeding?
wound. Yeah, clean a wound, stop bleeding, understand if somebody like broke their leg or not. Like, I don't know if you want to go to nursing school, but there's certain thing is level information that you would maybe you want to get into because like, just having to depend on, you might not be able to get to the doctor or get to the emergency room. So like maybe you need to have a certain level and take some time to learn some basics, right?
I have a dear friend who delivered her baby in the back of the van, and fortunately her husband was there, and he knew enough first aid that all was well, baby and mother were well. But can you imagine if he didn't have the mental fortitude or any medical knowledge whatsoever, he would have just panicked.
Yeah. It's like it's important because so many people are like, well, this is leave it to the experts. But sometimes, like, with the world we have is so segmented where, like, you don't like the older generation, like grandpa, like he built his house. He was a coal miner. He learned how to be a plumber and an electrician and farmer. And he was like, West Virginian Morgantown coal miner. So he kind of was like, could do everything you need to do. And then he
Yeah,
had
there's
7
so
kids
much
and he taught
about
his kids all
matching.
this stuff, what they need to do. So the whole family was kind of like everybody's got a talent. There's 7 know, they can get it done. But nowadays, like, well, I got to call somebody because I don't know how to do it.
That's another thing that I teach in preparedness is this lone wolf mentality. That's not going to work. In a crisis, we need a community. None of this lone wolf Rambo nonsense. You've got to create a community of people that you're going to trust and that you can rely on and exchange skills for each other.
Mhm.
And be particular about the community that you create for yourself. I mean, bad friends are a dime a dozen. You don't need those. Um, Good friends, good family members that you can rely on when the going gets tough. That's important. A community is really important.
Yeah, having a community, I think that's a big thing. Like in the arts, like you can't do it by yourself. Like a lot of times we all, it's better to go to a club with 7 bands and own that club that night than to try to go and be in that club as just you. If you go with 7 other bands, then you actually can own that whole night. And so
Yeah.
the idea of being in a community of artists is like, hey, we all get together, we'll help each other. We'll, I'll drive a Econoline van this into this state, you drive it to the next state. People just come together. Like if you build that instead of saying, well, I'm just going to be, like you said, lone wolf and just do it all by myself, then you're going to crash and burn.
Yeah, it doesn't work. At some point, you got to sleep. At some point, you've got to trust somebody else, and I'm an oddball. in the preparedness community for thinking that way. I'm also an oddball in the preparedness community for not thinking doom and gloom. I refuse to do it. If a conversation or a question I conjure up in my head does not bring peace and joy, and that's not a Pollyanna perspective. That's the state that we're supposed to be in, is
It's a
at
positive point of view.
peace and positive. Yeah. So if it's not peaceful and positive, I get rid of it. I don't need that negativity in my life.
Well, it's like there's a law of attraction. Like, I'm a Buddhist, but the idea is like if you think about positivity, then positivity comes to you. But
Hmm.
if you're into negativity, then it'll come to you. Like, so if you're prickly and aggressive and mean spirited, then that kind of surrounds you. If
Yeah.
you come with a point of view where you're like, you know what, I'm more into like enlightened point of view, or more into like I want the community to feel good. I don't want to be the only one doing well. So you kind of more like instead of not a top down approach, like bring everybody up. I mean, like all boats rise,
Right.
instead of like I'm the only guy got the super yacht and everybody else can just forget it. Like, no, you probably shouldn't be like that. That's probably not the best thing. Yeah, but it seems like in terms of like the biggest myths of preparedness, I think that you're kind of focusing on this kind of lone wolf thing. But what are other kind of myths about preparedness that people can kind of think about? Or
That people, that you need to worry about people coming to steal your stuff. You know, I nobody came to steal my stuff during COVID, and I had tons of toilet paper. So I think
yeah,
that I think they just go to that worst case scenario so quickly. And if that happens, you're probably helpless because somebody else is always going to have a bigger gun. Somebody
yeah,
else is always going to have more guns. So let's not focus on that. There's still a million other scenarios that you should be prepared for. We can't be prepared for that one. All right. So if it's going to happen, it's going to happen. But that doesn't
mhm.
mean that you shouldn't prepare. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't live a self-reliant lifestyle. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't learn CPR. I mean, that's just an excuse, and it's debilitating. It's paralyzing to have that kind of viewpoint. I think another myth is that people will stock up on things that they have no intention of touching ever again. They get it in their Amazon box and they sock it away instead of spending time to experiment with it and become familiar with it and know how to use it. I have I have some friends that I just give the hardest time to because they have solar ovens, but they've never used it. Well, for one, you're missing out on the best brownies on the planet. You have never had good brownies until you've had brownies made in a solar oven. They are amazing. So you're missing out on
Use
wonderful
or
experiences.
use it or lose it. Like if you just pack rat it, it's not that's not gonna like
No.
like
And and if you have to use it in a panic, that's the last time that you want to figure out how to use something new. You want to get familiar with everything. Another thing is stockpiling food and just forgetting about it. No, you use what you get, you rotate it. When people ask me, well, how long is the shelf life on such and such? I worry a little bit because to me, that question says they're planning on buying it and socking it away. But I don't do that. I rotate through things. I don't buy things that I have no intention of eating. I buy what I eat, and I eat what I store.
But I think that makes a lot of sense because we kind of started to roll through our stuff too. Because you look at it and it's like you're not going to just leave it there for 10 years, but
Yeah.
you got to look at it and it's like, okay, now it's time to replenish. Like, and that's why you get stuff that you're going to use. Like you said, if you get stuff like you're never going to get, well, I don't like these peaches. I'm never really going to eat them.
Yeah.
Then why'd you get them?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
It's like you're not going to eat them. It's like, why did you get them? You going to love having the peaches when you really need it?
What I like to ask people is, if it was your birthday, what meal would you want to be prepared for you? What do you want for your birthday meal? And almost always I can make that meal from shelf stable foods. Almost always. I haven't mastered lobster bisque yet, but uh, there are some exceptions. Seafood is a big exception, but usually I can make it with shelf stable foods. Well, that's what you want your pantry full of, are things that are going to bring you joy in a crisis. I mean, isn't that when you need the joy?
Yeah, what kind of examples of shelf-stable foods for people maybe that don't know what they are? Can you get like
So, like
categories?
home canned goods or commercially canned goods, those are shelf stable. Freeze dried ingredients, those are not only shelf stable, but they've maintained the majority of their nutrients for you. Grains are shelf stable. And there's all kinds of gluten free grains that you can have. You just need to, learn how to use them. Uh, Dried beans or canned beans, sugar, there's a lot of what we call forever foods, like honey is a forever food that's shelf
Mhm.
stable. You can, instead of having butter from your refrigerator, you can have ghee in the jars or a can. That's shelf stable. Even cheese is shelf stable. I mean,
Yeah,
I've got a lot of cheese recipes, and I make it with freeze dried cheese, or I know how to make my own cheese, and thus it's shelf stable.
yeah, I think it's really good to understand what is shelf stable. Like you just went through the list, so people get an understanding, and they just don't buy like prepackaged stuff.
Yeah.
Right? You probably do need to, in your in the downtime before something happens, in just normal life, learn how to cook.
Yeah. Yeah. They definitely
It's
learn how to cook. I'm a big proponent of that. So, for example, one of my comfort foods is tuna casserole, but I have Parmesan cheese in the tuna casserole. Guess what? That's shelf stable. I have green peas in the tuna casserole, shelf stable. I have tuna, shelf stable. I have pasta, shelf stable. I
yeah,
have a cream base, shelf stable.
everything there is like all shells, like you got to be in the can or in the box.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So that's yeah, and just knowing what to do, because some people, they just don't know what to do with the supplies, so they want some kind of like a ready-made kit where if you've got the capacity to learn, and then maybe even know how, like, well, what kind of cooking tools can I have? Like if I don't have power, can I have like
you
a
can have a little butane stove,
butane
and
stove? Yeah,
yeah,
stuff like that. Different ways of cooking that aren't super high cost, that you can figure out like what is your budget, what can you afford, what is your dream thing, and what is something you could do, right?
I
So
tell
maybe
everybody baby steps. Just don't go into debt to be self-reliant, because that kind of defeats the purpose of being self-reliant. Just take baby steps. The time to be prepared was yesterday, but the
Mhm.
next best time to get prepared is today.
Yeah, I think it's really important to know like your budget and know, like you said, you don't want to go into debt to be prepared. Mm.
Right.
And then get yourself in like you're all freaked out and then you got yourself in crazy debt for something that's like that's not happening every day. So why did you do
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. I don't believe in going into debt for your tangibles whatsoever.
And then how much time would people like spend per week or per month in preparedness activities? Like what's the kind of rule of thumb?
Well, I don't know what other people's rule of thumb is, but my standard for myself is I spend 30 minutes a day. And that may be gaining knowledge, it may be organizing, it may be using, but I touch a self-reliance, I enhance my self-reliance 30 minutes a day.
I think that's sustainable. That's not something like I think people can take time to do because and I think the problem is when people maybe go overboard and then they can't like if you can't sustain something then it's not going to work, right? Like so if you go and if it's not something that you're going to stick to, then you're going to lose it.
Yeah.
So it becomes like a fad. So it's like like you okay, I thought about doing this, and then you like you said, you picked something up from Amazon, you put it on the shelf, you looked at something, and you never look at it for months and months or years or years. It's like, what's the point?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So those activities may be organizing my pantry, they may be spending time at the range, shooting off a few rounds, or it may be reading a medical book or an herbal book or something of that nature. But I'm always pursuing something, and 30 minutes flies by. Sometimes I get really busy and I tell myself, look, you only get 15 minutes today. But next thing I know, I've spent 30.
Mm-hmm. And why do you think like 90% of people fail when they try to become self-reliant, even though they were kind of motivated? What do you
I
think
think
is the
it's
cause?
because I think it's because they don't have a proper roadmap. They're trying to get their preparedness tips off of, just any old Facebook group where you have this mind meld of people focusing on gloom and doom. If you have the proper roadmap, and I submit that the proper roadmap is the 10 principles of preparedness. If you have the proper roadmap, then it's doable. Then you can do bite-sized steps and you can actually accomplish it. But if you don't have the proper roadmap, it's very overwhelming.
Yeah, because you always have to have little wins. It's like when I tell somebody if you're doing like an art project, like if you're just thinking about by the time, the day you put it in the gallery or the day you put it on stage or the day you put it in the theater or whatever, it's like, well, then you're going to freak out. Like, it's like you got to take the baby steps to
Yeah.
actually do it. Like, and so some people just, they procrastinate because they just think they want to go 0 to 100
Yeah.
instead of having little wins. You got
Yeah.
to have a little win. If you have a strategy where you can have little wins all the time instead of trying to get the big win, because the big win only happens when you do the work.
The
So
little wins add up.
yeah.
If you were, Stephen Covey used to teach this, that um, if you attack things, the small rocks versus the big rocks, you'll have more room and you'll have more rocks if you focus just on the little ones, and those will make a bigger impact on you, because gradually, like every time you go to the store, let's say you've got a recipe that calls for cream of mushroom soup. Well, don't just buy one can, buy two.
Mhm.
Always just get a little bit extra. It's not going to kill your budget to get 2 cans of cream of mushroom soup instead of one, but that will make a big difference someday.
Yeah, you're just taking the time to prepare and putting the time, also just not, fear, like you mentioned before. Like if you're motivated only by fear, then things tend not, no matter what you do, they tend not to go so well.
Yeah.
Like
You
if you
don't
ever
think properly when you're in a fearful state. You don't think clearly. Your heart rate is elevated. I mean, it's bad for you.
yeah, if you can get yourself to a more, not that you got to be safe, like, but the idea is like every time your life is like stressful, but you don't want to be at the maximum stress level when you're doing your planning.
And I think
That's the
that's
best
why
idea.
self-reliance is so important, is because it does lower your stress dramatically. Like I was prepared for an earthquake or a tornado or flooding or whatever, but the one thing that I wasn't prepared for was a divorce. And I mean, I thought that was going to kill me, but because I had invested in the spiritual preparedness and the
Mhm.
mental preparedness and the physical preparedness, I was able to do things that I didn't know I was strong enough to do, and I was able to get through it. But that self-reliant mindset is what got me through.
Yeah, mindset is probably something people don't think about. Is that, well, they think about the money, they think about like the storage, they think about like the mindset is critical, because if your mindset is off, all those other things could be in place, but you'll make bad decisions about like what you should do, and then the whole thing's going to be like, if you don't have the right pillars, like your mindset and your body and your health and your spirit, like those are kind of foundational things. If those
Yeah.
things in the pillars of your life are not good, you can have all these external things. It doesn't matter because you're going to mess up.
Yeah, and I think with the mental fortitude, you can make decisions ahead of time so that when a crisis comes at you, there's no question. You know how you're going to handle yourself. You know what decisions you're going to make. You know what your priorities are. You've got to have a north compass, and that comes with that spiritual and mental and physical preparedness.
Yeah, you can roll with the punches. Like if you know, it's like in music, sometimes there's an idea like it's like no bad note, there's an opportunity. So if you're there practicing the song, doing the song, and then somebody hits a wrong note, but if you can adjust to that note in real time, that means you can riff, but you can like if some unexpected comes at you, you don't fall apart.
Right.
You roll with the punches. right?
Right.
If you're the kind of person that something unexpected happens, and it's like, oh, I'm just totally off, and then you just totally like you just throwing them off the game, and they're done. Right? They can't get through the rest of the game. Like if you're an athlete and you're just running to the play, and somebody does something that wasn't in the playbook, and you can't respond to it, then you mess up. Then the
Yeah.
whole game you mess up, and
And your
so
whole
you
community is messed up.
yeah,
Your whole
it's
team.
until you like you figure out how to oh don't just overthink it and wreck the whole thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, that mental fortitude is key. I was watching a show one night. I couldn't sleep. It was late at night. I was just flipping through the channels and I landed on the Kardashians. And I was like, okay, I'm finding out what's the big deal about the Kardashians. So I was watching, and in this episode, they were going to get a pedicure, but it was the kind of pedicure where you put your feet in this water and these little fish bite at the dead skin on your feet.
That's
It's
different.
only the bougie would do something like this, but one of the Kardashian sisters was freaking out. She was having a total meltdown because of this procedure, which she wanted, she paid for, and yet she couldn't handle it mentally. And I'm just thinking, girl, you've got to have some real life troubles. This is easy.
I thought you
You know,
wanted it. You're paying
yeah,
for it.
yeah, that mental fortitude was definitely lacking there.
Yeah. Well, yeah, maybe you wanted to try something, but it's like you weren't ready to try it.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it's like the fortitude is really important. Like the mental state is so like you can psych yourself out. Like what people always talk about, like you can psych yourself out of something. You can psych yourself into something.
well,
And
a
so
lot of people talk about, this is another myth that I like to dispel, that you need a lot of money in order to be prepared. That couldn't be further from the truth. Like I said, there's all kinds of principles of preparedness. You don't need money for spiritual preparedness. You don't need money for mental preparedness. Last I checked, there's libraries. You
yeah,
can still read. You don't need money for physical preparedness. I mean, there's so much that you can do without having a lot of money that will make so much the difference in your life.
yeah, there's a lot of stuff you can just like, the internet's like a big library.
Yep.
You can just go find tons of stuff and there's tons of YouTubes and how-tos on all kinds of things. If you take the time and you got to be discerning, you can find it. So it's a lot of it's like, is it you have the time to learn it? Do you have the time to read it?
Yeah.
Well, if you don't have the money, you've got the time. Time and money are the same thing, right? Like so,
Yeah.
if you actually don't have the money, you might have the time. So
Yeah.
take the time and go do it.
I agree. I agree. Invest in yourself. Invest in your joy. Invest in your peace.
Yeah, investment's hard for some people. They don't know what they have to give you. Sometimes you have to have a permission structure because some people just think, well, I can't do it.
Yeah.
Get the can't mindset. Well, once you get past that, it's like, well, maybe you can, or maybe, and then you try it and then you have that little win. And then he's like, oh, it's not as bad as I thought. And then you can actually get into that routine. So
Yeah.
it's like
That
baby.
maybe I can mentality is important.
Yeah, that's hard. Some folks they kind of been maybe trained they can't do it because they've got issues with their mindset. Or if you grew up with everybody telling you can't do something, it's hard to get out of it until you finally kind of get to that moment where you don't want to be there anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree.
So
100%.
are there like some key lessons learned in your whole process of putting these preparedness strategies together that maybe like are there three like big lessons learned that you experienced?
Well, invest in your spiritual and mental preparedness. Put in the time. I mean, that is the biggest lesson I learned. My divorce came at me from left field. It wasn't an ugly divorce. My ex and I are still amicable, but it was the last thing in the world that I thought would ever happen to me. And if I hadn't invested in that spiritual and mental preparedness, I never would have gotten through it. That's definitely a life lesson. Another one is creating that community. It's been a big benefit for me to have a community, and I've structured it. I've been very nurturing to it. I've been very deliberate about it, and it's meant the world to me. the people that I have in my community. Just so valuable.
Yeah, I think that's important because, like you said before, can't kind of Rambo it.
Yeah.
It's always better if you pull things together. Being a musician, like if I'm with a band, it feels a lot better than just doing it all by myself.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like there's something about when you accomplish something, you actually get that song done. If you're if you're in a football team and you get that play done, anything you do at a team level, and whether you're in a community and you're making an effort to outreach to people and you're in a group effort, and when you actually get to your goal, that feels good. Like you feel like, oh, we actually helped people. We made the neighborhood better. We
Yeah.
did something.
Yeah. Yeah. And the more people you can share your self-reliance mindset with, the better, because your friends and neighbors being self-reliant means that you're better off too.
Yeah, if you get that whole mindset into your neighborhood.
Yeah.
And you find out, like you said, it's like you might not know how to do something, but your neighbor knows how to do something. Then if you communicate, then you all know, like if this person knows how to do this person knows how to do that. And then so something happens that we know who has what skill set. But if you
Yeah.
don't talk, you wouldn't know that.
Yep. That's right.
So that's an important thing that you mentioned. I wanted to bring up again because that's like if you Rambo it, you wouldn't think that way. You wouldn't think to ask your neighbor. You'll try to like just do it yourself.
Yeah. You lose an opportunity for somebody else to become better by serving you as well. When you're willing to ask for help, they grow and learn because they're able to give you the help. You grow and learn because you're able to accept the help.
Well, I think that's a real positive, note to maybe end on tonight. But that's I think a lot of the things you talked about is really cool. You're bringing a unique perspective to this idea of preparedness, and I do appreciate what you've been able to bring to the audience today. And we do have your Facebook group below, and that's going to be fully clickable. It's facebook.com/groups/preparedness pro. And that will be fully clickable. We were just on Facebook Live, YouTube, and Twitch. And we do recommend everybody who's watching the podcast that can click onto the link. We have people click onto the links of the guests that are on the show so you can get more information. That's a group that people can join, right?
Yeah. And I have my Facebook page, which has about 48,000 people, but it's not as community oriented. So I started the group so that everybody could comment, everybody could participate, everybody could learn from each other.
That's cool. So we do recommend that people check that out. And you have written some books that we'll mention again. The Magnificent Pantry and Neanderthals in the Kitchen. Those I imagine are like on all the places that you can get books, right?
Yep,
Like Amazon
absolutely.
bookstores and stuff.
Yep, wherever you buy your books.
Do appreciate again you taking the time to be on the podcast. And I want to thank you again for being on the Family Like the Ghost podcast.
Thanks for having me.